Good morning, everyone. I'm Adam Sexton. Thanks for tuning in. He worked his way up through the ranks from local to state office, but his bid for Congress last year came up short. Jack Flanagan lost in the Republican primary in New Hampshire's 2nd district, but with one race under his belt, he wants to jump back in and win this time around. The former House Majority Leader joins us now in studio. Jack, thanks for stopping by. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Adam. Thanks for having me. It's great to be back.
Absolutely. So we're not too far removed from 2016, but it already feels like that political landscape has shifted a little bit. What's different heading into 2018, in your opinion?
For myself?
Sure.
I think I got the lay of the land. I made some good contacts. You know, like anything, if you do it once, you learn from, I hate to say mistakes, but you learn things to do and what not to do, territory to cover. Fundraising, obviously, is a big deal at this level. No, I think like Jim Lawrence did. I mean, he ran once before, and I'm going to say he might have had a little bit of advantage over me last time because if he had that network of people already in the district.
Mm-hmm. The congressional shooting at those baseball fields in Virginia,
yeah.
Representative Scalise is improving, which is good news, likely not to be a fatal incident, which is great, but it's obviously terrifying and it casts a bit of a dark cloud over the Capitol. When you were watching this unfold, you were thinking, this could have been me.
Well, it's funny you bring that up. I did play baseball in high school and in college, and if I had won last term, I love the sport, so I in fact could have been on that baseball field. But you know, things happen for reasons. My late mother used to be very philosophical about that. You know, you just take whatever you've got and then learn from it and move on.
Mm-hmm. Should Congress be doing more to ensure that people who are severely mentally ill don't have access to firearms?
The situation already is that way. I mean, there's background checks, there's limitations on firearms now. New Hampshire has a very good background check as it relates to gun shows. You cannot sell a gun to someone privately unless you know them. So, you know, the debate for gun control or gun laws, I think New Hampshire does a pretty good job of it.
You've got this very classic sort of political resume where you're selectman, state rep, House Majority Leader, but in 2016 that kind of all went out the window. It didn't matter at all. Do you think that might change, that things in 2018, perhaps something like that, the experience might matter again? I
hope so, because you failed to include that I chaired a school board. I was a vice chairman of a cooperative school district who happens to be the best school district in the state, which is Hollis Brookline. I hope so. You know, the one thing about last term, we had the presidential race. I think people were on overload. We had 4 people running for governor. Kelly Ayotte, of course, took some bandwidth of the media and so forth. So I'm hoping that, and I think we had this conversation, is that Governor Sununu has been doing a great job. I think if he does get primaries, it won't be a serious primary. So the congressional races will probably be the races that people will be, you know, keeping an eye on.
Mm-hmm. And we have an interesting dynamic here setting up because we have an entirely Democratic delegation in Washington, but Washington is controlled by the Republican Party in the White House and Senate and Congress. There are a lot of independent voters in CD2. What do you tell them about how you would fit in Washington?
Well, here's the thing. One of the reasons that I was running was Mrs. Custer itself. I mean, she voted against veterans. She's voted against Israel. She's voted against reforming Dodd-Frank, which is we've lost 2,000 banks in the country. The issue about health care, health insurance, you know, the dynamic that takes place where they call it Obamacare or Trump care. Let's just get rid of the rhetoric or the demagoguery and say, let's reform health insurance. I have a background in insurance, so I think I'll be able to go right in there and say, you know, these are some of the problems that might be challenging. I'm on Obamacare because I'm not employed by a private company. Or even a state, in that matter. But
how's that worked out for you as a consumer?
You know, there's a couple bad things about it. I mean, I know about the tax on medical technology that comes up, which could actually suppress new technologies to help people health. But the one thing that really is disconcerting is that if you make more money, you pay more money. So it's a disincentive to be successful. That in itself is not good for any economy or any individual.
What do you think of the bill that was just unveiled in the Senate this last week? Essentially, we're looking at the potential for Medicaid to be eliminated. Sorry, excuse me, Medicaid expansion to be eliminated starting after 2020. Is that something you would oppose, given the help New Hampshire's received on the opioid crisis?
I supported the work requirement. which did not pass. I supported the Medicaid expansion because of a couple of reasons. One is you can't work if you're ill. And if you're chronically ill, that's certainly going to inhibit it. So the concept was get healthy, get back to work, and that did happen. Also, I was told that the actual rates, the insurance rates, were not going up because of Medicaid expansion. The hospitals required it too. Personally, I think we need the work requirement. I think in Concord yesterday, the budget included some verbiage on working if they did receive it. But also the opioid situation. I'm not sure if we need to put opioid treatment in Medicaid expansion. In other words, I think if the federal government wants to help with the treatment, it should be a separate line item somewhere in Health and Human Services where it's not connected to Medicaid expansion. You can basically block grant Medicaid expansion and allow the states to do it under the guise of, we want to help everybody, whether they're on Medicaid expansion or not.
Right, yeah, the more local control, but the question mark is how much money would be coming here anyway. One of the other big question marks for any Republican who wants to go to Washington right now is how do you define yourself in relation to President Trump? Well,
it's funny, President Trump's not drawing a salary. He's not, he's not taking a paycheck. He made certain promises and that he's keeping. I think he's done a very good job at immigration. I think the economy is doing better. The situation with the travel ban is rather contentious. I'm going to give him a little slack. I remember when President Obama ran, and as a Republican, I wasn't really happy that he had won. But the mantra was, well, just give him a chance. He's everybody's president. And I'm going to repeat that. I'm going to say, give the guy a chance. He's been there, what, 5 months, 6 months now? And he's done some good things. I have to praise him, too, on his cabinet picks. I think he's got some very good members of his cabinet. So hopefully they'll give him good advice, and hopefully he'll listen to it. If I could say anything is lighten up on the Twitter account.
The social media there. That seems to be a common refrain among Republicans. They'd like to see him
just calm it down a little bit.
So the Senate passed some tough sanctions on Russia, and that's in the House now. They're still kind of looking at it. It's unclear whether they're going to water it down or pass it along. Where do you stand on this? Should Russia pay more of a price for meddling in the elections here in the United States, or is this sort of more something that you see as a side issue that's a distraction?
Well, I mean, if you really look at the genesis of this whole thing, it was Mrs. Clinton's server that she had placed in someone's bathroom. Okay, that's what allowed Russia to intercept some of these emails that were between the DNC and herself and her campaign. And it's blown up to Russia, Russia, Russia. Every time you turn around on various channels, it's something about Russia. I don't think one vote in Brookline, New Hampshire, or even Manchester had been changed. In other words, they didn't go into the machine. But they did get involved in our elections. And I'll let the process work it out. Should Russia have its hand slapped? Maybe. Yeah, I mean, I think they should let us do our electing, and they do, hopefully, their honest electing in Russia. That's tongue-in-cheek.
We mentioned the independent voters in CD2. What's the issue you'd see yourself reaching across the aisle on where you could get together with Democrats?
Well, usually Democrats would be having their interest. My interest, personally, I'd like to see a balanced budget amendment. I think the economy in itself needs a balanced budget. The other things are job creation. We've got to figure out how, and I think we talked about that when we met earlier this week, was that, I think there's still a large chunk of people that are either unemployed or underemployed. So they're more economic issues, but that doesn't keep me from being involved with other ones. Similar when I was a legislator in Concord, you can juggle financial issues, economic issues, but deal with educational issues or foster children, which I am very proud of a bill that I got passed my last year up there too.
All right. Jack Flanagan, former Majority Leader of the House of Representatives in Concord, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
On this Sunday.
And if anybody's interested, give me a second, jackflanagan.org. We're trying to get our website up, and hopefully I can be your voice. I know a lot of people want change in Washington, D.C., and with the background that I have, I think I can do that. So Thank you very much, Adam.
We'll see you out on the trail.
Thanks.
Thanks, Jack.